Okay, everyone, we catch up with Paul and Silas after they've been released. So last week we saw that they were imprisoned, falsely, but imprisoned. They were beaten in prison and then let go, and they're sent off. And we catch up with Paul and Silas today. So they were in Philippi, and we catch up with them today in Thessalonica. And while they're in Thessalonica, they go there, and we see that, as was his custom, that's what Paul did. He would go first to the synagogue. So he'd go where the Jews would gather, and he'd teach there on the Sabbath. That's what he would do. That's the first thing he would do. And so he went there, and he preached and did as much as he possibly could. And there were Jews who did believe, so there were a few, and there were some Gentiles as well. So we get to add some lights there. But then there's opposition that comes from Thessalonica. People aren't super happy, and so they kind of kick him out. They, in fact, go to this bloke Jason, where they're staying. They go to his house, and they drag him. They can't find Paul, so they drag Jason before the market and a few other people, and they beat them, and they kind of get really angry towards them. So there's quite a lot of anger here, and the Jews are kind of stirring it up, and there's all these issues going on in Thessalonica. Again, that's Thessalonians, so we have those passages, those books of the Bible. And then they travel on to Berea. And in Berea, we see that actually the Jews are more noble than what they were in Thessalonica, we're told. So we have some Jews who are converts, and they believe, but the Jews from Thessalonica hear about that and then go to Berea to cause trouble. And so Paul has to leave, and we're just going to have to deal with two at the moment, but we have some Gentiles, and then he goes to Athens, which is what we got this for. That's coming. So Paul's in Athens. And so we've seen Paul has moved quite quickly the last little while, haven't we? And every time he's kind of been driven out. So we had Philippi, where people were angry and drove him out. Thessalonica, people were angry, drove him out. Goes to Berea. They're okay, and there's believers there, but people from Thessalonica come to Berea and drive him out. We saw that with Lystra, and we saw it with Iconium. Like, there's that push that just continually just pushes him along. Obviously, we've had to change the lights because I needed them somewhere else. But there's now Paul in Athens. Paul is in Athens. Now, Athens is the seat of philosophy and kind of knowledge. That's kind of the way they understood it. But it's also a city that was full of idols. There were gods everywhere. And Paul is really distressed because he goes to Athens and he sees a whole bunch of people who are really lost. Because he sees a shrine, a god, and the inscription reads, "To the unknown God." So basically, what would happen is people lived in fear constantly. And so if they needed something to happen, they wanted to get a job, they wanted their proposal to go well, they wanted a good crop, their cousin was setting out on a journey at sea, so they wanted to have him be safe. They would do all of these things to try to kind of please the gods. But there was that fear of, but what if it's not that God? What if I haven't got the right God? What if I've offended some God I didn't even know about? What do I do then? How do I deal with that? And so they had this shrine where, that the logic of it is, well, you could go and you could offer a sacrifice to that unknown God. So you don't know them, you don't know that you've done anything wrong by them, you don't even know if they're the right God, but it's just, just to be safe, it's that insurance policy of I've done everything and I'm just going to do this little bit extra to this one I don't know about, just in case. And Paul sees this and he stands up and he talks to them about God. And there's a bunch of people, so Epicurean and Stoic. If you read through chapter 17, again, I encourage you to, you'll see this kind of Areopagus where he goes, where they talk about stuff. And there's Epicurean and Stoic philosophers that are like, what is going on here? This guy is babbling. He's mad. Because in kind of Greek philosophy and debating and argument, there's very clear structures and how it should work. And Paul would have been following them because he was Jewish and would have followed the Jewish structures. But these philosophers, they're actually basically opposites. So Epicurean philosophers, they come from Epicurus or Epicurus, however it's said. It's ancient Greek, so he's not going to get upset about it. He's already long dead. They kind of had the understanding that you could learn everything about the world through your senses. So what you touched, what you tasted, what you smelt, what you kind of saw. The senses that you had were what defined what the world was. You could learn about the world through them. So not completely wrong. We would definitely say, of course, like you see things, you touch things, you can learn about stuff through all of your different senses. And so that's where they were. And they kind of tended towards more the kind of pretty much we can do whatever we want. People will now talk about Epicurean restaurants, which is like a full-on sensational thing, like sight, sound, smells, food, but lots of it. It's all about feeling and sensation. That's kind of where they went. The Stoics, on the other hand, if you've seen How to Train Your Dragon, the dad's named Stoic, because that's what he is. He's stoic. We don't use it quite right. It wasn't emotionless, but it was about a sense of calm at all times. So their thing, so it wasn't necessarily about senses, because their thing was, well, actually the senses can be wrong. You can see something and your mind, so that's where we get the word phantasm from, ghost. Your mind makes an image, and so that becomes your reality, just from your senses. So instead you need to use logic and reason. That's the thing. They're the things that you set forth to understand the world, is logic and reason. So Epicureanism was senses and reason isn't that helpful. Stoics, it's reason and kind of emotions, not helpful. Get rid of them because they cloud your judgment. You want to be reasonable and logical. So you don't want to be angry or sad. You don't want any of the heightened emotions. You want to be just kind of level, because if you're level, then you can reason and have logic. Again, not wrong. There are optical illusions. There are things where you think you see something, but you actually don't. I spoke about in one of my sermons, saw a guy kind of teach how to do a magic trick. He's phenomenally fast. And I know it's an illusion. I know it is. But what I see is a card there, and then he makes it disappear. I know it's not gone. I know that card exists and he's done something, but I just don't know where. And so our sight can be tricked, or even just, any optical illusion. You look at it and you're like, oh, but we're wrong. Like with reason, you go, that's not right. So that's kind of where they sat. And not completely wrong, but that as the only thing is also not completely right, just like Epicureanism. And they go, you talk to us, Paul. And Paul goes, okay, well, I will talk to you. I do want to explain some things for you. Now, I'm going to read a heap of this. Now, it is a pretty long chapter, or a long bit, but it's important for us to read. So, kind of in the 16 onwards bit. So while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. So, like I mentioned. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to debate with him. Some of them asked, what is this babbler trying to say? Others remarked, he seemed to be advocating foreign gods. They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, may we know what this teaching is. So the thing is here, they're philosophers, so it's about knowledge and learning new teaching. So that's kind of where they're coming at. And so there's a little kind of, your Bibles might have it in brackets, but Luke just points out, because he's the one who wrote Acts, all the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. So that's a little bit of a sledge for the Athenians. But Paul stands up in the Areopagus and says, look, I walked around and saw all these gods, and I saw a shrine to the unknown God. They're like, okay, here it is. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he's not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from any of us. In him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. So Paul kind of goes on to say, look guys, you have all of these gods. You have all of these idols that need you. They need you to bring them food. Like you're offering things to them as if the gods need you to bring them food. The God isn't sufficient in themselves. That's not a God. Instead, God, he doesn't need us to provide anything for him. In fact, God provides everything for everybody. That's the way that relationship works. There's the Greek gods where they're really quite petty and they're quite needy and they need humans. And then there's God who humans need. We rely on him for everything. So Paul actually says to them, guys, God has shown you what he's like. God has shown you in the world. Like you Epicurean philosophers, you can taste, you can touch, you can see the flowers, you can see the birds. All of your senses show you what God is like. Stoic philosophers, your reason and logic should show you what God is like. Because actually he has designed both and he is both. He's not one or the other. He is both and encompasses that reason and logic and encompasses the senses, not to the point where they go because they went a long way away, but that's who God is. And in fact, he says God, he has revealed himself to you in everything, but particularly he's revealed himself to us in Jesus. And that's a really big thing because what we see, people are crying out to know who God is. If you think about it now, people now will find our friends will say a prayer maybe to someone. They'll ask karma for help. They'll ask the universe. People are reaching out for something. They know there's something else. And they're trying to do a bit of an insurance policy. The people who aren't actually Christians or Catholics but carry around the cross as a bit of good luck or whatever. Like that sense that I'll just have this insurance policy just in case. And we actually have a message of, no, we know who the one who gives everything. There's no insurance policy needed. Go to him and he's got it sorted. Doesn't mean life's going to be perfect and easy. I mean, James was executed, so it's not going to be kind of a joyous-filled or happy-filled, wealthy, healthy life. That's not the promise. But having hope for a future with Christ is knowing where we go when we die is something that we can have joy in. People are reaching out, they're crying out. Even now, they're crying out to an unknown God, a God they do not know. Now, God has revealed himself in all of our nature, but he's particularly revealed himself in Jesus. If we want to know what God is like, if we want to know who God is, then we just got to look at Jesus. So if you're a follower of Jesus and you want to tell others about him, if you want to, and people ask you what God is like, point them towards Jesus. He is God. He is how God has chosen to reveal himself in a definite way. If you don't know who God is, if you're not a follower of Jesus and you are interested, look at Jesus. Look at who Jesus is, how he acts, what he does, his compassion and concern for the vulnerable. That's who God is. Look at Jesus out of love, taking your and my place on the cross, taking our punishment, suffering for you and me, that you and me could be with him. That's God. Have a good week.